Hi, I'm Nicole from New Consulting, and you're watching New Talk, which celebrates cool people and their solutions for positive change. Today, I'm talking with Sashti, the founder of We Radiate, which is committed to creating a greener world by improving waste management systems through technology, urban agriculture, and composting. He is an educator developing novel approaches to creating technology and digital tools for mitigating climate impact and enhancing soil health. He is also the founder of We Radiate, which uses smart sensor digital technology to enhance efficiencies with farms and compost facilities. We're so excited to have you on because you have been doing so much for climate change through We Radiate. So why don't you start off by telling us about you and your background?
Sounds good, Nicole. Thank you for just for the opportunity to chat with you and with New Consulting as well in your organization. So happy to. Thanks for the invite here. So a quick little spiel on me. Backgrounds in public health and environmental health, and was actually for a number of years. So I worked in New York City in public schools and was teaching sustainability classes. So some of my courses or school that I was with particularly was called BUGS, which is the Brooklyn Urban Garden School. And there I was the sustainability coordinator for that middle school actually. So what does that role entail? Sort of like doing hands-on curriculum, teaching kids about gardening, doing water quality assessments, doing energy audits, and even doing waste audits in school. So that's my educational space. Also then started teaching adults in the Master Composting course. Also was a founder or a co-founder of a community garden in Brooklyn as well. So that's sort of where I was doing a lot of community organizing, volunteering management, and just supporting a vacant lot and then to a thriving community space. Sort of those experiences led me to work with called the New York City Compost Project. So it supports composting at schools, in businesses. My team and I, we were in Manhattan, so we even got the United Nations to compost as well. And then sort of moved into, was working, so I grew up in Buffalo, lived in New York City for a number of years, actually moved back to Buffalo as the city's, Buffalo's recycling coordinator, working for the mayor's office and started composting opportunities there and also started environmental education with the Buffalo Public Schools as well. So all of that sort of led me towards sort of We Radiate, hustling nights and weekends, and then just thinking sort of how can we use data and science for community good. And that's sort of where the idea blossomed. And in 2019, I left a nice government job to be an entrepreneur. And that's sort of where I am right now.
Terrific. So tell us about We Radiate because it does several different, it fulfills several different missions. So can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, some of our values, certainly. So it sort of blossomed in Brooklyn, but preceding that, the idea first started was the magic of composting. So I'll sort of talk about that as well, but I just saw that take place here in the US and also in India. So it's sort of how do you produce something of value, which people think is sort of trash and sort of valueless. So that was sort of the initial concept, and compost is one of those items that we think is very important for climate, for education, for learning, and also just for growing healthy food. Yeah. So what we are, we're sort of a number of environmental fun people that get along. We are an organization and sort of have a couple of parallel themes. One is data and technology. So what does that mean? We have smart sensors in the ground tracking important composting metrics. So sort of digital data to enhance the process for efficiencies, for quality, for safety. We also do a number of educational aspects. virtual trainings, but also on-site consulting. And we help farms, we help communities with their own composting programs or just backyard composters as well. Another thing is actually we do sort of personally, I do sit on a recycling and waste committee board, just as a public citizen, so we're helping elected governments, officials who want to start composting but just feel unsure how to do it, how do you set it up, what are the logistics necessary behind it. So sort of, we're considered an ag tech company through New York, but definitely have specialties in a lot of specific nuanced areas.
Okay. And then, so just going back, can you talk about the science of composting and why it's important to climate change, like the impact that it has on that?
Certainly. So, composting as a whole, it's providing nutrients back to the earth. When we are growing food, we're using the nutrients the plants are getting it from the ground, and we're consuming that as humans. And what we're doing is we're not necessarily replacing that back, but compost is one way to do that. So if you want to create healthier food or higher quality food, compost supports that sort of cycle. Yeah. So what that is essentially organic. This term can be termed as stuff that was living, returning those nutrients back in the soil. So that's sort of that cycle of composting. The science behind it is, and the value behind it. So how I sort of approach the subject, different stakeholders think about it differently. There's a financial impact. So government officials are looking at their bottom line, or stores or restaurants want to figure out how can I save money. Well, there is actually a cost savings if you can compost, and the financial impact. There's also an economic impact in terms of jobs or job creation. And what that means is every ton you send to a landfill, if you're actually sort of processing that locally, you can actually create job creation, because we're not shipping our food out to other places across the country or across the world, right? So metals, plastics, other paper, but food we can actually process that locally and then reuse that locally as well. So that's a pretty powerful economic impact. And lastly, the environment. So what we've seen is healthy soils can absorb carbon. And there's a book recently called Drawdown. And what this is if we could create healthier soils all across our ecosystem, we actually can reverse what's happening in terms of climate or carbon in the air by actually absorbing more climate. And the term of this is being applied right now to farms. It's called regenerative agriculture. That's sort of minimizing the amount of chemicals, pesticides, herbicides used on our land, sort of growing food in a more natural way. And compost would be sort of that natural fertilizer that helps with these soils.
So a couple questions about the data. Can you tell us more about the data sensors in the ground and what they do?
Certainly. So why would that be important? So data and technology is sort of, in our generation, data is being used to improve health outcomes, educational outcomes. And the soil itself, if you drink wine, it's being used in vineyards at the moment. So one of the things with agriculture is how can we improve soil quality if we're going to use crops, if we're going to grow food on that land. So what we're doing is we're tracking a couple of indicators in the process. One is temperature and moisture. So temperature is important. It can minimize, if you hit a certain threshold, which is 131 degrees Fahrenheit, it can minimize E. coli and salmonella. So that's important just for quality and safety. Moisture as well is valuable for us. If it gets too wet, it can start to cause odor. So those are sort of initial indicators of collecting that data. And then we're sending it, essentially to your phone, to your dashboard, to a laptop. And the process is, instead of doing it manually, can digital data support you in terms of your operations, in terms of compliance? Sometimes this data has to be shared to the government, so making sure you're actually following certain protocols as well.
Okay, very, very cool. Do you work with conventional farms or corporate farms, family farms, like, or all of any farmer?
Yeah, we run the gamut right now. My focus is sort of small to mid-scale facilities. So it can be small farms in urban areas. It can be medium-sized facilities in rural areas. It can be landscaping companies as well, or just composting facilities that want to start with food scraps and then maybe want to do manure, cultural debris.
Great. And then, so you're also doing work with community gardens. So you're working with New York's waste management system. So tell us how that important work is impacting New York.
Yeah, so something we've released, the community data compost map. And what we've seen, I've done this for about 12 years, there's a number of amazing organizations and entities in Illinois, in New York, in Ohio, in California, all across the country. But there's a disconnect. They're incredibly decentralized, which is great. I think local, do a lot of local good. But the difficulty is, how can you aggregate that local good and sort of understand the complete impact or visualize that impact? So one powerful way is sort of what we're doing is we're aggregating material that would have been diverted away from landfill and actually summing them. So this initiative started just a couple months ago, and we're using just New York State facilities and 2 million pounds of people inputting their information just to aggregate impact, for financial impact and also greenhouse gas reductions impact as well. So sort of using the community to collect data.
Great. And then it saved the state a lot of money, hasn't it? Like the impact has been really tremendous.
Yeah, so we've seen research, we're using research, we're just pulling it out. So focusing only on New York City, just the sites that are processing their material local can save thousands of dollars in the city's budget. And these are groups who are just doing this at a volunteer basis. They care about this. Instead of going to a landfill, can they reuse the material that would be destined to a garbage can and actually create healthy soils and healthy food?
Okay, great. And then, so composting, we just got into composting, and I know it can feel a little intimidating. So can you, if somebody wants to start, like, what are your top tips for
Okay.
composting?
Yeah, absolutely. Start small. Yeah. So one way of doing it is we could call it a waste audit. So is you're just figuring out what's happening. This doesn't necessarily raise the financial aspects, but it's checking out what's happening in your waste stream. So it's a waste audit. So usually the best ways of starting out is, if you're a vegetarian, perfect. A lot of vegetarian material can be composted, so just start with that. So that's lettuce, fruits, vegetables, tea. People don't understand coffee or tea can be compostable. Eggshells. Start small. Start vegetarian. Have a bucket or a container. You could purchase it online. And storage aspect of where you're going to place it. So let's say you want to collect materials after you're making dinner or before. Figure out where you're going to place that material. So have some sort of, you could either place it in the fridge after you're done, and then if you want to do it in your backyard, there's a couple of options, or there's a couple of bins. So we could get kind of technical, but we don't have to right now. But it's sort of starting small, doing it vegetarian, having a bucket called greens and browns. So essentially what that could be is your material is rich in nitrogen, that's your food scraps. You have to then add a similar volume of carbon. Carbon can be sawdust or mulch, and essentially a 1-to-1 ratio can allow you to compost in your backyard. But we could talk about that in like another composting session, or there's a plug. We do have a couple of workshops upcoming as well.
Good. And then, so businesses and small nonprofits. So if they want to start a composting plan, like as we all start thinking about how the workplace works and move to a hybrid model or completely go back into the office, how can leaders incorporate that into their CSR or their climate change plan and how they're going to contribute to that?
So how can they start one? Let's say a restaurant or a business. How can they start becoming incorporating these values into workplaces? Sure. There are a number of environmental organizations that can do consulting, but one way is getting maybe a team. A team is always important, and it shouldn't necessarily rely on one singular individual trying to create change. If you can create 1 or 2 or 3 sort of communities of individuals, and maybe incentivize them to do good, I think that can be a really powerful step for businesses to start. So an example I'm just thinking of a restaurant that maybe might have vegetarian material, and maybe you could designate somebody to collect processed scraps and sort of place them into a bucket, sort of designated specific roles, and try to start small, right? There's so much low-hanging fruit. I think in a lot of ways, and sort of build up on those small wins and sort of create greater change throughout that company's history.
Okay, great. And then you have an event coming up soon. Tell us more about that.
Thank you. So we received a wonderful grant opportunity through an organization called NextCore. So I'm plugging them, and we want to piggyback off of that opportunity. So we are having a digital fundraiser in the next couple of weeks. I think it'll start mid-March and it'll go through April and maybe early May. We're calling it Invigorate Soil Ecology through Compost Technology. And what that sort of means is we want to showcase that technology can support with climate issues, with also supporting improving your soil health for food quality growth. So this is a way financially donate, contribute, and we do have a match grant opportunity available. So the funds will be used for this community data compost map, which is an open access map for users. We want to enhance that. We also are strong in education, so a number of workshops as well on different themes of composting and soil health. We usually do a compost bike tour as well. So this is something that bike enthusiasts, also compost nerds, can sort of go through places across New York and sort of see different ways of how waste reduction or food waste reduction is happening. So that's sort of what we're using the funding for. Actually, I forgot, local manufacturing is important. So creating local supply chains, creating regional growth opportunities, that's also valuable and important for us. So we want to be able to develop our hardware and software locally to support these themes.
Great. And if people want to join in on that fundraiser or attend the workshops, where do they go?
Cool. Thank you. So we can find us on social media. That's our tag is at We Radiate NY. So We Radiate WERADIATE NY. that's sort of on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. And the donation for that is Invigorate Soil Ecology through Compost Technology, and that's through a platform called IOBY, IOBY. It's an acronym for In Our Backyards. So, yeah, feel free to follow us on those types of media outlets.
Great. And then is there anything else that you want to tell us about that I missed and you think people really need to know?
It's really easy to compost, and there's a lot of hesitations behind it. I think it's going to create smells, it's going to make vermin or rodents come into their homes. It's going to cause nuisance. But a lot of that is sort of unfortunately not necessarily true or valid. If you do composting, it's sort of you'll understand the power when you put out your trash or recycling, how much material you could actually minimize out of going to the landfill. Yeah, you're shaking your head, so you recognize that.
Yeah, I've noticed a difference.
Yeah, so it's powerful in that way, and it's actually a step or an opportunity that you can do at a personal, individual level to support these overarching themes of climate or soil health or food quality. So, start small. Happy to support you on this, and feel free for questions or insight.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for joining us for New Talk.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks. Thank you for watching New Talk. You can learn more about working with New Consulting on marketing, growth, customer service, and management by visiting newconsultingfirm.com. That's newconsultingfirm.com. See you next time.